a special seed.
Oh, okay.
So my daughter and I are growing lots of the flowers, we hope, for the wedding. So keeping our fingers crossed.
What kind?
Ambitious. So, hi, Carol.
What kind of flowers, Jill?
Pardon me?
What kind of flowers?
Well, I saved a lot of seed from flowers and plants last year. So I have red salvia, blue salvia, and lots of coleus. I saved lemon gem marigold seeds. They are tiny little marigolds, and the plants are very scented. So there's a tangerine type and a lemon type.
Oh.
Libby had bought seeds. I have baby's breath and alyssum going, snapdragons, linaria. She bought, that was something I wasn't familiar with. Linaria, nicotiana, and I have lots of zinnias. So 2 different types.
Each late.
That's what's on my, I think there are a few others, but that's what comes to mind at the moment.
So how big are these plants? I mean, June is not very far away.
I know. My tomatoes are much bigger than my tomatoes are getting to be about 10 inches now, but well, I have hope. The zinnias are about 4 inches, but they just need to be outside all day. I do have lights, as you can see in the background. I have 4 shelves of lights, and so everything's actually doing really well this year because of the lights. It's having great success. So
what happened up there?
We just hope it'll come together. We did pansies as well. And hi, Benjamin. Hi.
Hi.
There's our youngest member attending. He may help present next month.
He wants to sit at a Grammy.
Oh, he's going to be with your mother?
Well, he just wants to say hi to her. Yeah, Benjamin. Benjamin will definitely.
Hi, Benjamin. Hi. We're disrupting the meeting.
That's okay. We don't have a lot to talk about tonight.
It's the social time. We're being social.
That's right.
Well, I'm gonna jump in here since we're a little past 7:30, and we'll move on to the business meeting. Luke, can you take over and lead that?
Sure, Dave. Well, thanks everyone for joining. I know we're gonna have more people joining the call. I'll make the announcements brief. We're adding a lot more hikes and paddles to the calendar, so please make sure you check that. That includes some multi-day backpacks, multi-day canoe trips. There is a multi-day backpack that Reinhardt is leading starting next week, I believe. He actually has 1 slot open. It's going to be on the New Jersey section of the AT. So if anyone is interested in that, please contact Reinhardt right away because he would need to make plans with you accordingly. Okay. We are still looking for a young members chair. If anyone on this call or any friends of yours that are members are interested, then please feel free to contact me. And we've had some luck filling some positions lately. So right now, that is the only position that we're actively recruiting for. Okay. And that's about it, Joe.
Okay. Well, tonight we have a couple who are going to speak to us, Steve and Kathy Riegel. They are longtime members of the Adirondack Mountain Club, but they are very active and avid bicyclists and have taken many trips bicycling. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve and Kathy, and they will tell you where they've cycled and about their trip. Welcome.
Kathy and Steve, just hold on a second. I just want to make a brief note. I'd like it if everyone would mute themselves That helps so that there's no background noise. If you need to get something to me or to the speakers, you can always type it in the chat room. So sorry to interrupt Kathy and Steve, but I'll let you guys take it from here.
Okay, so I'll probably take the, I'll put the chat up at some point, or at least towards the end. Yeah, it'll be mostly me speaking, because if they get the two of us going, it can be kind of weird on this kind of setting. But yeah, Kathy and I just kind of fell into the bicycling business as our recreation of choice. My late wife also was a cyclist in Rochester Bicycle Club. We knew Kathy and rode with her quite a bit back then. And, you know, I needed somebody else to chase, you know, when the time came. So I chased Kathy, and the 20, you know, almost 20 years ago, we're still together. So we're still enjoying the stuff. And it sure is something you both want to be into, because the widowing side of bicycling, you know, where one does it and one doesn't, and can be stressful at times. So it's really nice if you can find somebody who enjoys the same sport as you guys well know. Yeah, I'm going to, we've done a lot of cycling, both, you know, mostly first world, you know, Europe, US and stuff. And as Kathy was approaching retirement at Excelis, back in 2014, she and I had started to say, you know, we got to go somewhere different, you know, and try something different. We've always had an interest in Asia, Southeast Asia in particular, you know, Vietnam, Laos, others. So we decided to make that the retirement gift for Kathy, is that we'd take off, and we did a couple of trips back to back in Asia. We went to Laos because we had seen some other folks who had done that. And then a week later, we were in Burma or Myanmar for a 2-week trip. And that's what this is going to be about. I'm going to switch my screen just to give you a little taste of the company we've been using pretty much exclusively for these types of things. Although we know of 3 or 4 different companies that many people have used to do these more out of the way types of trips. But our favorite is, I'll stand up, I'm wearing the jersey. We were down to Chile and Argentina with these guys called Red Spokes. I'll switch the screen over to sort of their homepage.
Steve, I'm going to interrupt just a second, because I just want to make sure that people know that you can go up to your right-hand upper corner and put the view on speaker view. And then Steve will be filling your page, just in case you didn't do that and would like to do that. You can see him larger.
You may not want to do that. I mean, it's mostly going to be the pictures, I think, or I hope, because I'm going to be looking to the side a lot as I talk.
That's good. All right. Just wanted to let people know they could do that.
Okay, because I don't think once I go into this, I don't see you guys. So Kathy will come running in here and beat on me if I'm not responding to something. But anyway, let's see, are you guys seeing the rolling pictures of world's best cycling holidays, Red Spokes? Is that what, are you seeing that, Jill? Jill, you're welcome to unmute. That's okay.
Yes, we can see it.
We can see that right now.
Okay,
Yeah.
because that's the one thing when you're presenting, I can't see it, so I don't quite know if it's there. But this organization out of London has been around since about 1990, founded by a guy who just became really interested in off of the beaten path kind of places to go. And as you can see, there's just quite a set of offerings that they have, and they're scrolling left to right along the bottom. Dermot, the guy who owns it, was running trips in Syria right up until the bombs started falling there. He's just that kind of wacko Scot kind of person. And most of their trips are surprisingly affordable. Our trip in Burma was a 14-day, 14-night kind of thing with an extra day or two, and cost about a little under $2,500 per person back then, and is about the same price even now. And anytime you can get under $200 a day for a fully supported cycling trip, it's pretty fascinating and pretty good deal. So anyway, that I just wanted to give you kind of the overview of them. I'll let me see if I remember how to do this. I'll get us over into my slides now. And I assume you're seeing all this action, right? Let's see if I can get this. Got to get the slideshow started and then stop it. But again, this is when you drill down in their website to a description of this particular trip. This is the kind of thing you see, and they give you they actually give you a background, how difficult it is, approximately how much you're doing per day when you are riding. That doesn't mean you're riding every day. There's quite a few places where you're staying a couple days and stuff like that. So 50, it's kind of it varied from 40 to 70 miles per day, depending upon what you're doing. And all your food stops and anything that happens with the bikes, all taken care of. It's really quite good. I know it says 6 days in the bottom down here, but this is actually a 14-day trip that they have. So I can't say enough about these guys, Red Spokes. We've been on 6 or 7 of their tours, Laos, Vietnam, India, Chile, Argentina, etc. And they've just been incredibly good. They're forced to use local support people. Mostly the governments of these countries require that. That's where they get their cut on taxes. In the case of Burma, that's where the military government gets its money, is one of the big sources of money is tourism. They take quite a cut on all the tour operators. Bicyclists, they tend to allow them to wander a bit further into more restricted areas because we tend to be fairly independent. We're not like, extremely wealthy people moving along in a bus or a Target of any kind. So you get at least some different treatment within most of these countries as a cyclist. In case you're, these couple slides are just orientation where Burma is between India, China, and the Far East. This maps, I did these all about 7 years ago, and these were about all the maps I could find. Myanmar, you can kind of see it in there. I think if I made the mouse cursor big enough, I hope you all can see. And it just is tucked in there. Bangladesh is around it. India kind of curls around the top of it, this pink area. There's a segment of India that borders Myanmar as well. Just a kind of the overview of the trip. You can see 2 very straight lines that actually go over mountains. That is not us cycling. Those are flights, about 300 miles. We started down in the south in Yangon. There's a picture of the mountains that those flights go over. But yes, we rode over some of them too. A little more of a zoom in. Yangon is the main gateway for just about anybody coming in and out of Myanmar these days. On this map, I'm just trying to indicate in capital letters the main stopover nights that we had. Yangon up to a place called Inle Lake, which some of you will have heard and seen about. It's a unique biosphere lake with floating gardens and floating housing and all sorts of things. Pandaya, Buddha caves all over the place. A couple other smaller cities, Bagan, just fields and fields of fascinating Buddhist temples that were built. And then for the cushy part of it, you fly down to the beach here at Nepali Beach, and it's a very pristine beach. But it was a really nice break after all the dusty cycling in between. And then we got on the dusty bikes again and went down to this little town called Gua, which is not a town that most people would visit. We did have to get some permits to go down that way, but you'll see some of the fun comments I have on Gua when we got down there. It got very local and very pleasant as a result. And then worked our way back to Yangon. So that's kind of the circle there. Now, most of you probably know this lady, Aung San Suu Kyi, who is sort of the one who's really spearheading the democracy movement in Burma. I'll switch back and forth with the name Burma and Myanmar because there's a lot of, because of various military coups over time. Most notably in 1990, it was still called Burma, and the military said, oh, things are going so well, we can have some elections now and sort of act like we're heading towards democracy. Well, Aung San Suu Kyi had come back to the country to take care of her mother at that time. And her father had been assassinated by the military government just after World War II. So she started speaking out, and the elections in 1990 overwhelmingly went towards the democracy direction. And the military said, nope, there's errors in the counting, there's the elections void. And they retook power basically. And that's when the name of the country actually switched to Myanmar. Is the government said, okay, we're going to start distancing ourselves from our British colonial past. And that's when things started to get pretty rocky. It's going to be a little bit chaotic here in how I talk through this, because I realized I could try to go through the history and it might bore you to death, and it's hard to remember because of the various switchings. But just keep in mind that there's this push to become a democratic republic, and the military is nervous about that because they like the power they have, but they also see that if they don't let the people have some sense of this, that they're going to have a bigger problem on their hands. And Aung San Suu Kyi kind of represents that. The 400,000 men afraid of one woman is trying to get at this military side, that is so intimidated by anything she does, because the uprising that could be in the country could make it really, really bad if they dared go too hard against her. She, on the other hand, doesn't want to do this doesn't want it to happen with bloodshed or a horrible way. She really is like, okay, look, here's how maybe we can do this, where you can relax your grip on the country a bit, let the people have some voting, let them have some privilege, get the international, conform to the international community's standards for not persecuting everyone and shooting people on every demonstration and all that stuff. And if we get more trade going with the outside world and better goodwill and tourism and that, you as the military, who has kind of socialized the country, I mean, most of the major industries are nationalized, will get more money and more wealth. You guys will benefit too by opening the country. She has that dialogue and seems to have been able to convince the military several times, the various ruling military governments, that this would be possible. And so it's been kind of fits and starts towards getting to democracy. Every so often, every 10 years or so, the military rulers are like, well, let's try another election. It seems to, everybody seems to be okay with us now. We'll still put a little kicker in there where we get to choose a quarter of the parliamentary seats no matter what. So we stack it in our favor. They'll structure the elections in their favor. And yet they're still not able to win. The National League of Democracy just keeps winning each time. So this cycle just continues to repeat. And sure enough, as some of you know, if you're following much of the news, we don't hear about it a whole lot here in the US, but in February this year, after elections again in 2020, again, the National League for Democracy Party won all of Parliament, and actually won so much that it just totally kicked the butt of the military ruler parties. And so they immediately said, election irregularities, we're shutting down, and they are now in a state of emergency, and all their communications are cut with the rest of the world. We do stay in light touch with some of the leaders who were running our trip when we were there, and we haven't been able to contact them. they're probably okay. And I'm not concerned from that standpoint, but it is quite concerning that this cycle keeps going. Maybe they're going to get there, and Aung San Suu Kyi and others are going to try to keep it as peaceful as they can, but we're just going to have to see what happens. So I checked at the travel state, the Department of State advisories for Burma, and sure enough, as I show you on the slide there, they're recalling all the not all the voluntary folks from the embassies, all the personnel to come back, ordered to come back home. And we don't know what's quite going to happen. Now, also, I assume this is probably either recorded or I'll make sure to pass on this info. These two films are of particular use. It was an interesting thing. We didn't really learn a ton about Burma before we got there, but after being there, we come home and we go, what the hell was that? What's going on in there? What's this tension we feel in every, whenever we're in a bar or with people? Why are these buildings in such disrepair? Why is everybody, out there breaking up stones to repair the roads? All this stuff. These two films can give you more of a background of why things happened the way they did. And I think the second film is particularly interesting because Robert Lieberman was my physics professor at Cornell when I was there, and I didn't realize that he went off and did some undercover filming within Myanmar to sort of show the state of affairs there.
Steve, just a note, this is being recorded and it'll
Yeah.
be available on the website in a week or two.
Okay. So I'm going to glance at my notes, see if there's, I think I'm not going to go into the history too much more than that. One point though is before World War II, it was a British colony essentially. Many of the buildings and other things you're going to see are just these lovely British colonial in the towns and stuff. Infrastructure was there. Japanese in World War II seized Burma. The British had to destroy a lot of their own infrastructure that they had built in Burma because they didn't want it falling into the hands of the Japanese. The Japanese were cruel. The movie Bridge on the River Kwai, it's a interesting, build it all back up for us, but build us all. It was in Burma basically, and build this bridge back up, the Japanese said, but the British made sure to, destroy it as well. So Burma has just suffered, it's heartbreaking because they were probably the most advanced country in Southeast Asia going into World War II, and they recovered some of that even just after that. Most literate, wealthy, they exported enough rice to feed all of Southeast Asia. Great mineral wealth, great metals wealth. The country's kind of being bled by that, by the military government to some extent. It's a real shame they fell so far, and their people really hurt for that. Anyway, our arrival come from one of the benefits of being there. We didn't have a whole lot of time zone shift because Laos is pretty much in the same time zone, so we were able to show up, leave in the morning, and end up there at night in Yangon and wander the streets and go get a meal and everything. The street food is wonderful. The people are pleasant. Next morning, we can finally get an eyeball on what this town looks like. And in a tropical region, that's why the buildings have a lot of moss and mold on them. Here's some of that facade architecture that you would see from the British influence. It's safer to walk in the streets. Are people seeing that picture? If you're walking on the sidewalk, there's a lot of infrastructure below the sidewalk where the covers aren't there. So it's a curious place, and that's when the questions began. It's like, what the hell happened here? Why can't this even be kept up? And it's just because of that destruction of infrastructure and the keeping the population relatively poor, the military rulers not putting much back into the country. Typical Far East wiring. If you need electricity, hook it up yourself. But again, like I say, street food, totally fine, totally wonderful, probably some of the best. Kathy and I often think about this, about our trip to the Far East, especially Laos and especially Burma, because in Laos, we both got sick enough to continue to lose weight. And we were our thinnest ever when we were in Burma. And if any of you've seen us in person, you're going to notice that difference, that we were in the tropics, we're getting 24-hour bugs once in a while. You just have to plan on it. And virtually always, it's only a 24-hour thing and you're done and good to go again. But yow, we did get thin there. But that street food is probably the safest stuff because it's hot, well cooked. You can see it being cooked right there. You might not know what it is, but it usually is going to taste good, and it's usually not going to have any pathogens on it, which is great. Wandering the town, many little Buddhist temples in the local streets, can wander in and take your, you want to have quick to pull off sandals because you need to be barefoot in all these places. But we could wander in. And here I'm getting outfitted for the largest pagoda in Yangon called Shwedagon Pagoda. It might be the oldest Buddhist temple on earth, actually, they believe. And there men have to wear the long skirt that goes down to their ankles. We are barefoot as well. And like I say, we're at one of our thinnest levels. I don't know if I have an overall picture of the pagoda, but behind this scenery is the large stupa rising to a height. And apparently in the Buddhist culture of theirs, you celebrate your day, the day of the week you are born matters. That's something that you come to offer alms or offer prayers or celebrate your birthday, if you will, at the temple by going to the particular corner of the temple that is your day, like this one being the Saturday corner. And you can do your ritual of pouring the water on the Buddha figure. Each of the days, it's very hard to see this dragon or snake that's down at the bottom, but each of the days has a particular animal, etc. And so it's one of the rituals that the people will do is come through to do that. I think there's a picture of Obama doing this when he visited in 2011. But as many of these temples are, there's like dozens and dozens of side temples created, bequeathed by rich folks in the past. They might have different themes, Buddhas, different dressing of Buddhas, maybe different families come to each of them. At this particular one, we were getting pretty hot. I didn't get a family picture. We were, it was 90 degrees plus and we had our water, but we were still getting dehydrated. And families were having a meal and would be inviting us to eat with them. We couldn't communicate that well, but we could communicate well enough. The openness was beautiful. The relaxedness of visiting the temples was beautiful. That's my thinnest picture ever. So, and that's the main stupa there in the background. Man, I almost look as tall as it, right? I've never looked that tall. If you see me in my normal bicycling shape, that's not it. that's below. I think I normally sit around 165 pounds. I think I was about 150 there. And a lot of it's just because you're not eating processed food. Okay. Which, especially when we get out to smaller towns, it's which chicken do you want for dinner kind of thing, and here it is, you want to kill it or shall I? I think that's, and bicycling in a tropical environment will help. But anyway, beautiful parks within the city, Crossing traffic can be a bit tricky. Traffic's a bit aggressive, but when in doubt, follow the monk, okay? Because the cars will all stop for the monk. And that's actually Kathy right behind the monk. She got smart. You know, if we finally figured out how to cross the streets, you know, find the monk. We joke that they have crossing monks for everything. Again, street goods, plenty of things that you could pick up for your daily meal. See lots of, you see the pink dragon fruit over here. That's a comet. We ate a lot of that while we were over in that part of the world. Shrimp, fish, you know, these are just along the streets. This isn't even in a formal market, but just all around our hotel. So just very plentiful foods. They don't have an agricultural problem of any kind really within the country. Oh, back to the pagoda at night. Earlier it was just Kathy and I wandering up, but now we had our group together and we were back for some night shots at the Shwedagon Pagoda. So this happens to be the daughter of our tour leader who was there helping us out as well. It's just fascinating place. This is our tour operator, Kalear, and she's the one who we try to keep in contact with regularly. We'll hear from her again, I'm sure. She, you know, all the tour personnel were guarded about certain questions, but once we got out into the really remote areas, they would open up and tell us their opinions on things. But as I showed you with the initial map, we started off with a flight up to the north. So this is actually at departure. Kathy over there on the far left. Kathy thought we'd be in a rickety plane where we'd be holding the door shut. It seemed to be pretty nice. It was a nice service all the way up on modern equipment. But again, it's because the military had all this money and they could purchase all these things for these state-owned, and they want tourism dollars. So they're going to buy decent aircraft and have decent operations, except this is how baggage is handled at the airport we arrived at. Yeah, just wheel it out in the cart. But nice little guest houses that we'd stay at. I think there was only in Yangon did we stay at much of a hotel, and it was still very much a family operated thing. Same in almost all these areas. Anytime you arrive, your tea is given. We had simple but very serviceable rooms, and always with an air conditioner. Although we were there in the December timeframe, which is not terribly bad. You rarely get too much above 90-degree type weather. It's mostly in the 70s and 80s. And we did climb, some of the towns were as high up as 4,000 or 5,000 feet in the mountains. And we actually got pretty chilly in some of those. So we had a nice variation of weather while we were there. When you're up at this area called Inlay Lake, the thing to do is to hop one of these longboats and take a tour. And of course, being a full service tour operator, they had scheduled stops for us at the various businesses that were selling things and for a good lunch and stuff like that. But just crystal clear waters. And these huts and their yards are all, I mean, the huts are clearly on stilts that are driven down into the soil down underwater, but most of the greenery you see in between is floating. It's a network of vegetation that's enough to even support tomato plants, all sorts of things. It's like a hydroponics type of growing that's been being done in these regions for years. And what's interesting when you have your gardens floating is that when there's a flood, it doesn't inundate your garden just rises. So it's kind of cool. It's very survivable actually in a lot of ways. And so life is lived on these boats here. And it's of course subsidized because this is a national heritage place, but a lot of people genuinely still earn their living here as well. Again, nice. I mean, you're going to start to see this cycle of ride, eat, sleep, go outside somewhere for breakfast, right? Eat. And so this might get boring in that sense, but hopefully the visuals will be different enough. Town had the heritage site had its forge where they were making swords and all sorts. There's a lot of tin, tungsten, and silver mines not far away in the mountains, and apparently these trades have been plied here for quite some time. One of our members is checking out one of the samurai swords that were created. Another big deal here is a lot of quote unquote silk wear, but the silk is actually, these are lotus flowers, and the silk is actually pulling out the strands of fibers from the stems, and then working it into a silk that they can weave fabric from. And a lot of those Buddha coverings are made out of lotus silk. Lotus being a key concept and associated with the religion. So again, you get to see all of this, and then of course you have to buy. I have one of the shirts, but I'm not bringing it out. I don't think I'll ever wear it, but I bought a shirt there, made of lotus silk. Back on the boat. This may be something you've seen or heard about with Burma, is the fishermen on Inlay Lake are famous. They do all kinds of fancy dances almost in front of you, but they operate alone. The water's fairly shallow. The green vegetation is high. They have to almost stand up in order to do things, whether they're tending vegetation or whether they're fishing. And they only have so many hands available, but they can wrap their leg around that oar and not use their hand and move the boat just by wiggling their leg, and keep both of their hands free to manage their work, whatever it might be. There's a guy, with a fishing net, doing, and that's a little bit of showboating there, but at the same rate, it does give you an idea of how balanced and interesting it is and why it's such a tourist attraction. I almost felt like we were on a cruise when we got back to the guest house, because they did the towels up in these elephant fashions. Next morning, this is the proprietor of the guest house and her little daughter, and sure enough, it was pretty chilly. You'll see tons of fleece that has Disney characters and everything, really cute. Breakfast was always outside, not necessarily always at the guest house. The guest house didn't always serve it, and it was always, a rice dish with an egg on top, vegetables, all kinds of good things. And again, our tour operator, Kalayar and Kathy. This is basically our first day getting on the bikes and getting oriented. Turns out we ended up having quite a few support crew. I think there were about 14 or 16 of us on the tour, and there were almost as many support people. And it happened because of a strange reason. Normally, Red Spoke sends one of its representatives on every one of these operations, but the guy who was supposed to come was with us in Laos and spilled his DEET insect liquid on his passport, and it melted his picture in Laos. So he had to get that underway and could not be with us in Burma because his passport was destroyed and couldn't get a replacement in time. So we ended up probably getting twice as many support people because, number one, it's less expensive, than one person from Britain, and it's a chance to get out of the big city and go on a road trip. So we just had a ball with these guys, and they just serviced us so well. Leaving Inlay Lake, again, you can see that now that probably begins to demonstrate the footwork there with the one fellow here. very fascinating. They just move quickly and efficiently. Somewhere along the way, I caught this picture, the sun hitting the drying corn. You know, a lot of drying corn on the roads and stuff, but just kittens and corn. Just loved it. I don't know if that's a cigarette in his right hand, but well, anyhow, this is one of the fellows guiding us on the route. We didn't have GPS devices. It probably wouldn't have helped anyway, because not all the roads are on all the maps. And so at questionable intersections, they stationed one of their guys to guide us. And we had to contend with rush hour traffic from time to time. Another thing you may have seen that's associated with Burma is this powder or paste that they put on their cheeks. They love doing designs of all sorts with it. It's called Tanaka. It's a ground tree root. It's of some specific trees in particular. And it's used as a sunblock and a moisture retainer and for decoration. And you'll see more and more of this. They like decorating up Kathy in various ways. This was a very simple approach of it, using a bottle cap with the paste in his hand and then pressing it there. Me, I went over to the ranch and while she was getting that done. Kathy, following one of the leaders, she didn't do the no hands, but she did make the bridge okay. And of course, they're guiding, just like to some extent, just like in Europe, one of the best things to do is to actually go to the markets that they have. And in the region that we were in, just past Inlet Lake, there was a huge market that we were able to invade and enjoy and just see. It's just so full of fascinating fruits and vegetables and fish and chickens and whatnot. It's just a delightful place to hang out. The flowers that they had. Yeah, again, nobody's starving in Burma. There's plenty of agricultural production. And they seem to love seeing the foreigners. We were there at one of the most hopeful times politically that we could have been. It was just after the National League for Democracy had made some progress, and they were coming up to a big election that they thought finally we're going to be able to have some leverage with the military parties. So everybody was upbeat, thinking everything was going to be fine. So we hit it at a particularly good time. Out in the rice fields, we saw these signs several times, which are, I think, some of the local government or even national government puts it up to guide the people as to how to plant the rice and how to spread it around, how to make it into rows, how to press it down, just to communicate the rice production work that they're so good at. Here's a little bit of the road works that I was telling you about. Apparently, I mean, new to us, but maybe not so unusual for visiting non-first world countries, where quite often large boulders are even put along the side of the road, and over months they're broken down with sledgehammers to smaller and smaller bits and then spread by hand. And yes, most of the workers tend to be women who are doing this. We saw that also in India. Love this little guy. I mean, we waved, he waved back. Again, very friendly, very positive people. English is often spoken since it was a British colony. So quite often there was somebody who spoke a little bit of English. Yeah, hitting those tire tracks just right on the bridges can be a trick sometimes. But each of the guest houses we stayed at was just beautiful. I mean, as we arrived, a woman and her daughter, you know, the gardens around these places, again, the food. I mean, it was as if they thought Kathy and I had just gotten married or something, you know, with the rose petals, and especially the mosquito net. This town is famous for a pretty extensive Buddha cave, where there's just thousands and thousands of Buddhas, but also has a story, a legend of how a prince rescued 7 princesses who were abducted by a spider back into the cave. And so outside of the cave is the picture of that prince killing the evil spider. It's kind of cute. Caves are well up the hill over the town of Pindaya. For some reason, you got to do all the steps and you got to do them in bare feet. So that's the way it goes. Once you're in the cave, just tons of different Buddhas, various families, leaving them as offerings, and you can see there's inscriptions associated with each. So, of course, richer families wanted to put fancier ones, whatever, but this is where all the junk ends up, basically. But also one of the rituals is to offer a prayer to the Buddha and to add a little bit more of gold leaf to the main stupa. Stupas are sort of like grave markers, but in this case, potentially contain a hair or two of the original Buddha or something, is what these symbols are. So Kalair instructed us on doing a prayer and then pressing the gold leaf onto a stupa. There's Kathy doing so. The top of one of the stupas, again, these can be adorned with quite a few jewels that a family donates. We thought this was interesting. The causes of becoming more awful. you can, it's sort of like if you're doing these things, you're going deeper into hell, buddy. And I'm not sure if any one of them sticks out, but you can see that a few of them are obvious tenets. And I think this got Kathy thinking about her Bible study class and how similar so many of these things are across the cultures. Same principles, same a lot of times same concepts. And so she causes some interesting discussion to happen in the Bible study when she brings up stuff after this trip. They're like, okay, I guess it could be kind of universal, but maybe not. I don't know. So we'll see what happens as we go forward. And of course, they're going to take you somewhere else to buy something after you visited all the sites. You've got to go to the umbrella factory in this case, where they make umbrellas out in the traditional way with flower petals and ferns and stuff on a papyrus type of material that they dry and stretch over the frame of the umbrellas. So yes, we bought an umbrella. Day we leave, the same gal who gave us the reception, I like her little hand warmer. It looks like some sort of rabbit that she's got her hands under. Cold morning. Again, November, December, and we're amazed how many poinsettias are growing wild in this area. I mean, they were everywhere, these poinsettias. So we were reminded of Christmas quite fully. Tea production in this area. So lots of tea leaves and folks picking them. Again, more agriculture. We were heading now towards a town that's just south of Mandalay, which is why we're pointing to the signage there. Yeah, most of the main roads would be tree lined because of how hot they can get in the summer. Yeah, and it's Kathy. I get pictures from behind her a lot. Just endless numbers of little temples and Buddha statues. A couple of interesting little crossings. There actually was a bridge here. Kathy found it. We do ride in sandals, so we don't care if we go through the water. It wouldn't matter anyway. Into yet another town to eat yet another meal. Now off to the coffee place to see this region grows coffee and have the explanation of that and chance to purchase some as well. So we got a poinsettia walk home that night. It was actually pretty dark. I had to lighten that picture up enough to see how big those poinsettias were. Next morning, by the way, at this point, we're up at about 5,000 feet, I think. It was pretty chilly. Only had electricity on from 6 p.m. till about 6 a.m. and breakfast outside. So put it on everything you own and get ready to go. Here I've got to do a little switch, I think. I think we're gonna, let's, I've got to get I got to tell this guy to stop because it was too small, and got to get back to, it bugs me. This is the part that I couldn't quite get right here. In the morning, we would have, the one guy would do a Buddhist blessing that we have our safety when we ride. So I just caught a little clip of that. We'd have that each morning to hope we reach the other side just fine. Again, another road works. Again, all women doing it. And then actually a totally spectacular downhill, as you can see in the sign, steeper than normal, it looks like, was coming up just around the bend. And we did have a beautiful descent. These are the kind of roads we love to flow down. And it was amazing, all that hand done work was incredibly smooth and maybe incredibly durable too. But you got to stop and eat again. Now we're down south of Mandalay a little bit in the valley, and it's getting pretty warm. You like your fit? Yeah. Kathy finally got used to having the fish looking at her in these places. This town we stopped at in the valley is a region that has an elephant dance festival, because we were riding by and it's like, what's this? And this is one of the costumes that two men will usually put on, just like two people in a horse outfit, but it'll be an elephant, and they'll get crazy, and do crazy stuff dancing with anybody along the street, or they have big dance offs in an open area. It happens on a lunar schedule that never corresponds exactly to Red Spoke's schedule of being there. So these are a couple of, photos that already exist of that festival. Our fearless leader actually rode a little bit. We were surprised. She showed up one day and was ready to go. And on down through the rice fields we went to stop yet somewhere else and be offered even more food. So like I said, it gets boring in that sense, but not so boring in terms of the differing foods we have. A lot of the Asian folks do protect their skin quite a bit. You see he's got a scarf over his face and everything. We saw a lot, like full coverage. I mean, we're like in shorts and sleeveless, and they're wrapped toe to head. Not sure why. The finest facilities that you need to stop at, we got used to going into the bush instead of using the finest facilities, but they were always there, always available. You just had to flush. It was just a manual flush mechanism. That's all. Another small town, good sized town, actually. It wasn't a tiny little village or anything. And we were staying at a hotel that really thought a lot of itself in this town. The town is called Minyan, and this hotel is like, yeah, New York, Paris, Rome, London, Minyan. Sure, you have to visit Minyan too, because they're all equivalent. You haven't been anywhere until you've been to Minyan. But of course, they didn't have a restaurant. You had to go down the street to a restaurant anyway, with everybody else and have a good time. In the morning, it's quite desolate. We went behind where the hotel was, looks like pretty quiet. Now, again, no major issues or crime or anything of that nature. Kathy and I did wander after dinner and go into the various stores. Next morning, outdoor cafe for breakfast. The seats are a little short. Rice and egg things. We could watch all the traffic go by in the morning. Another water crossing. Sandals work great. Lots of folks coming out of the fields to see us as we came up on the bicycles, the kids especially. They're actually building a highway across there, but apparently it's been going for like 10 years. They just have the pilings up. So most of the crossing is still done in the water. We stopped along the road at one point and this farmer and his wife came out offering peanuts to us. It was very sweet. It was just, it's the kind of thing we live for in our bicycling. We just love what little talking we can do and just the generousness of all the people who are out there. Oh, another water crossing. I wasn't brave enough. I couldn't see what was under the water in this case, so I was going to walk it. This town, you saw that image behind me. This town we got to is kind of a special temple on this karst rock called Mount Papa. And just like in India, monkeys are sacred, and they are freaking everywhere on this particular temple. And you have to take off your shoes at the bottom. And guess what? Monkeys can't always control and is all over the place, but is being cleaned all the time. It can be, you got to watch your step when you're bare feet and there's monkeys everywhere. But people are giving them lots of bananas to eat, and there's people constantly cleaning all the surfaces. And the views were gorgeous. We had a nice sunset up at the top. This monkey was even appearing to offer a flower to Kathy in the evening. Most of them they weren't as aggressive as monkeys we've seen elsewhere. Sunset. It was getting near Christmas. I'm not sure what this little award was, but it was a dancing Santa for something that happened during the ride. And then the crew got some music going and some dancing going for us before we crashed for bed and got up and did it all over again. This is kind of interesting. Just along the road, it's like along the roadside, this track has been used for so long that the oxen and the wheels have worn such deep ruts that it's like a railway alongside the road. Interesting. Stop at a coconut palm tree place, have a short break, but you had to try the quote unquote palm wine, which was moonshine when you were there. So this is some palm leaf artwork. And Kathy got her Tanaka refreshed. That's tea. Now on to probably one of the most interesting areas after the monkeys at Mount Papa is this area called Bagan, B-H-E-A-N. It's an area, a huge area of temples that were built by different families that wanted to make, wanted to show how much wealth they had. My temple's bigger than yours, better than yours. And the field of these temples just goes on and on forever. Rode the bikes up to some of the simpler ones to see the Buddhas inside. You need to make noise when you go into these things because there are snakes and other critters that you'll scare out. But this is, these temples date, from the 10th, 11th, 12th century. Just of all sizes and shapes. And it was the fanciest place we had to stay was along here. Then a night out at this evening out on a boat, and all these folks coming by to sell you all their lacquerware and all their trinkets. And man, are these people aggressive at selling you stuff. They're very cute, but they're very aggressive at the boat landings. I got my beer and my chips. I'm happy for a sunset cruise. But we aren't done. We get taken to a lacquerware factory and get the full pitch again. not just at the boat landing, but had to go through it here too. But very intricate lacquerware being done by hand. Quite a leaf pattern Kathy got on her cheek this time. Next morning, they got us up before sunrise, and we got on all these little electric, Chinese electric scooters and went out to see sunrise across the landscape of these temples. So this is moon setting, as the sun began to come up, and you'll start to see these temples going on and on and on in all directions as the sun comes up. We've climbed up one of the temples. That's all our scooters down below. One of the best shots of Kathy I know. She loved being in this region. And of course, if you paid the extra, you could take a balloon ride in the morning too. Then off to yet another market. This one was more interesting because of the fish and clothing, and Kathy loves to see all the poultry and other things ready to go. If we want some chicken legs for the day, we can get them. This is the Tanaka root that you grind against a stone to make the powder to put on your face. And then we just use the scooters for the day to go check out some of the other larger temples in the area. All the animals paying homage to the Buddha, these dioramas that you'd see. We got suckered into doing some sort of offering, put our money in the bowl and do some sequence of something. I'm not sure what we were doing, but it was fun. The food, quite often the food is offered in a tapas-like fashion. It'd be all kinds of beans, maybe fish, a lot of different rice preparations, mostly vegetables, some organ meats and stuff. We didn't quite know what they were, but they tasted great. It was a very interesting type of meal service and very filling and very tasty. One of the oldest temples in the area with several famous Buddhas, I guess. I lose track after a while because there are just thousands and thousands of these temples and Buddhas. But we had fun zipping around from place to place. Me, a wild man on his electric scooter. And of course, they're going to sell you things. We finally had a decent Western style wine and dinner out on our own at night in this town. And then it was to get on the plane to go down to that beach area. We're getting close to the end now. The beach resort was gorgeous. I mean, and again, reception with fruit juices, always the case with these operations. We had a good couple of days here. You could ride further down. You could take your bike and go down into the fishing village if you wanted to, or just chill out. We mostly chilled out along this area. Again, getting near Christmas, so they were cutting the watermelon to look like trees for us. And when we go out to dinner, there's more music and dancing from the support crew. we had all kind of a conga line going through there. Yeah, I'll have the third one, whatever it is. But mostly it's prawns. These are giant prawns or shrimp that are split. That's why they look a little funny. Very good. I had picked up quite a number of thorns over in Bagan doing all that riding around those temples. Everybody and their brother stopped to help me. This is probably almost our entire crew helping, quote unquote, helping me with a tire. But I think in the end, it was a passerby and I who patiently picked out every thorn that was in the tire, and then we were good to go. I think when I see this picture, I think of firemen with their boots out in our towns collecting money for the fire department. That's kind of what goes on with the monks in the towns. This is kind of what another stop would be like. So that gives you an idea of kind of how relaxed our stops would be. Way out in the bush, we come across one of the offices for this Democracy Party. Very strong support for Aung San Suu Kyi throughout the entire country. Red Spokes also usually works with the small remote schools. He brings in computer equipment or other goods or stock that they need. We bring it in on each trip. We had a fairly large bus at this point, and a good part of the bus compartment was stuff to be delivered to the school. Really nice. And again, many of the kids could speak English. It was just a delight to be with them all. More roadworks. Another beach. More beer and rice noodles and egg. And then this place. One of the last places we stayed, this little town of Gua in the middle of literally nowhere. Some of the standard, we were warned that the standards of some of these inns was a little less than you might expect. She pulls out of the bus a whole set of boxes of sheets and stuff that we should take in and put on the beds. And I thought, we ended up rooming with two of the other riders, and we had a full almost working toilet, which had a string for the handle, and it even had an assortment of seats off to the side. And there was a frog that liked to wander through the place at night, and so you just had to watch your step. But we got the fancy room at this place, complete with netting and everything. And what's really interesting is we learned a little bit about karma. Is one of the other couples, a younger couple from London, was very upset. The other facilities, other rooms to stay, were concrete bunker type places, not as nice as this, but they would have had to stay with another couple if they wanted to stay in the nice one. And they refused to do that, and they demanded to be taken to a better hotel. Well, there weren't any other better hotel. There almost wasn't any other hotel, and this was the best one. And I guess in the middle of the night, a water leak caused their ceiling to drop in on them. So that was karma for them. Down the street, having another sort of fish soup kind of breakfast. It's more like a chicken broth with rice and veg. They would take over the kitchen of any of these little cooking places and our staff would do all the cooking to make sure it was done reasonably well, including doing deep fried dough once in a while too, to keep us going through the day. Commuters. Long day in the saddle here. It was pretty darn hot, but we just took it easy, kept our hydration up. More roadworks. That one I couldn't quite ride over. I've never met a hill I can't walk. Nice sweeping road that we really enjoy. We're going through the core of the rice fields outside of Yangon at this point. School was letting out in one of the towns when we were there. Our fine accommodations at the next place, but because we were so easy to deal with, we got a room with air conditioning. And the couple that was a pain in the butt did not. So. They got to within a certain distance of Yangon, our start city, and then they had to really put us all on the bus, take the bikes separately, because it just gets too congested getting into town. So they took us to a place for lunch where we had the most special treat of all, ice cream. I mean, refrigeration is a problem. There's not really much steady electricity anywhere except in a couple of the large cities. And this was one of the few places. So she knew what to do for us. Stopped by the tour operator's office, which is right across the street from Aung San Suu Kyi's house, which is the headquarters of the National League for Democracy. Picture from one of the better times when she was there under house arrest, or not the better times, but she was under house arrest and all her supporters helping her out. Back to the street market, off to one of the bars. People were a little hesitant to talk to us, but loosened up because we did not talk about politics. There's a lot of snitches and secret police amongst all groups of people, especially in the city. So they are a bit hesitant until they know you're not going to be discussing anything sensitive. The final dinner out was a place that prepared duck, and Kathy got the bill. She couldn't tell what that was until we looked at it very closely. Pretty much our whole crew. Fast drive to the airport, buy a few more trinkets, and flight back to New York. People have probably been to JetBlue at JFK. Man, I was glad to get more ice cream. And that's it. That's our trip. Jasmine flower in the woman's hair, common thing. One of the most common ways to decorate. Okay. Let me see if I can unshare the screen now. Or if you want to somehow figure out how to do questions. Do we have anyone left? I guess that's kind of the question.
So Steve, there are a couple of questions from the chat room. One is, what kind of snakes were you seeing?
What kind of what?
Snakes were you seeing?
Where did I see that we had snakes? I think I only.
You said in the temple, you had to be careful.
In the temple areas.
Oh yeah, we actually didn't see any snakes. They just said to make noise in case they would, to get them out. I don't know the varieties of snakes that are there, but they do have some poisonous ones. I mean, it's a kind of a deserty area there in Bagan. So
another question was if you brought your own bikes, as well as what kind of bike quality you had, and how was daily transportation, luggage, directions, all that, kind of the logistics handled.
Yeah, we did not bring our bikes. On some of the Red Spokes tours, you have to bring your bikes, but in most cases you don't. And Red Spokes often purchases the bikes for the tour operator to use. So they're all pretty well maintained, within 1 to 2 to 3 years vintage, and mechanically they were totally fine. I don't think we had any issue on that. luggage, you know, they were not terribly restrictive about it. They're used to having so many types of tourists in who bring the kitchen sink that we didn't really have any restriction on that. And luggage moved smoothly. Logistics were unbelievably smooth, I think.
Did you end up using maps, or how was the finding of the routes and that sort of thing?
Well, again, there's enough staff that they position people at any of the questionable intersections where you might turn incorrectly, and you're not making a lot of turns. I mean, we're out in the country. There's relatively few roads, so they don't have to have too many personnel. And there was at least a truck to handle bikes, as well as a bus to handle anybody who couldn't ride, or for the final transport to the city at the end. So that was, you didn't really have to think much about the route.
There's some more messages in the chat room. I'll read them. Do you travel with giveaways like candy for kids?
I think they advised us not to do that, as I recall, in the preparatory materials for this trip and many others. We didn't know, it seemed that here in Burma, none of the kids seemed to be looking for anything from us. In Laos, no, kind of pretty much the same thing. A few trips we've heard of, they would be looking for money. I think we had a little bit of that in India. Kids were looking for some money here and there. But usually they were often just exercising their English. So they would be asking about money, and you might even pull something out and they didn't want it. So it sort of was curious. A lot of them just want you to slap their hand. They'll put out their hand, you know, as you're coming by, and they just want you to slap it. So
There are several comments of people enjoying the slides and your comments. They appreciate that quite a bit. How did you get through on days you were sick? Did the rest of the group keep going? And
oh
how was
yes,
that?
yeah. There's a schedule, so you're gonna Imodium and get in the bus. And if something gets urgent, they'll stop and you can get out. Yeah, one bout that I had in India knocked me down pretty good. And when I was the only one in the van, and when they stopped for lunch, I couldn't even conceive of going into the place, you know, so I just stayed in the van. And next morning, totally fine. I mean, for the most part, these things are pretty transient. And I did in India, in that particular case, the day before, it was, oh, a chance to eat with your hands. Yeah, well, I didn't do it right.
Other questions from folks? Feel free to unmute and ask a question if you have one.
Steve, it didn't look like you were carrying water bottles on your bike. How did you handle the water?
Huh. Well, we usually didn't have to carry much because the stops were frequent. Okay, and they were constantly checking on you, either riding their bikes up and back, or you'd pass by the bus again. So usually you had plenty of opportunities to get it. I'd have to look more closely. I'm sure we had some water, and I may have been using a Camelback. Kathy definitely was. So I'd have to go back and look at that. But we have taken our Camelbacks on many of these trips and done it that way. Maybe that's why you aren't seeing the bottles in the bikes. One day we did stop in kind of a rest stop where none of the crew was around, and transacted just fine that we needed water, and we were good.
Thanks.
Sarah asked another question. How do you know if you're at the right level of biker for these type of trips?
If you go to the Red Spokes site, they give you a pretty good verbal description of the difficulty levels and relate it to normal cyclists, i.e. not us. Red Spoke's goal is to get people out to these places who may never have biked much at all, because he really has a heart for getting you in touch with other cultures. And so the goal is not to do great miles. And virtually all these trips, they can accommodate somebody who finds that they're not able to do as much, or they get qualified pretty well up front. A couple other vendors we've worked with would even call us and interview us before, when we first used them, to get an idea of what we're able to do. And they would ask the questions and kind of figure it out. Never a worry though, because of all the bus support and everything, you could ride any amount of it you wanted or not.
Have very good rating systems on their trips too, difficulty ratings, and you could see the profiles. I mean, if you can do a trip that's 50 miles a day, 5,000 feet of climbing, they lay it all out for you, and they rate them from 4 to 10.
And I believe at the time we did this particular tour, I think it was rated at like 6 or 7, and a lot of their tours are rated at 4. Again, we had people. In one case, we had somebody who was a diabetic who needed their insulin properly maintained temperature-wise in Laos. They handled that just fine, and she had a ball. Some of these people are just coming out of their comfort zone. They're London city people that he's encouraged to get out, and they just take really good care of you.
Another question was, what was your average daily mileage?
On this particular trip, the shortest day was about 40 and the longest day was about 80.
And a question from my wife, were you often riding without the guide or local leader?
Not really, except that they may have, we may be on a stretch of road that has no turns off of it for quite a while. And so they may have gone ahead. The bus and some of the crew has gone ahead. There's always part of the crew is riding at the back, and probably the support truck is also at the back. So there were some times where we didn't see some of the crew, but most of the time we did. And certainly when we came to any intersection, they'd be there guiding us or waving us into somewhere else to eat.
Any more questions people have? Well, thanks, Steve and Kathy, very much for a really enjoyable presentation. It makes me think about doing a little bit of international biking myself. So thanks very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
I'll say one thing. Quite often my feeling is these tours with the local operators in these second and third world countries, we were better supported on these tours than we've been on some of our European tours. I honestly believe that.
Yeah.
I mean, they have a reason to want to do that because you're foreign to the culture, you can't communicate and stuff, but it just seemed to be so much more service oriented than a lot of first world trips are, or you'd have to pay double to get the kind of service level in first world. So they're just spectacular, I think, and anybody can do them pretty much. They offer, a lot of them still now have e-bike offerings. We were in Albania last year or 2 years ago with Red Spokes, and they even had e-bike offerings.
Thanks. We'll keep it open. We'll keep the Zoom open for another minute or two if people have another question or to ask Steve and Kathy. But that'll be it for tonight. But as I said, we'll just keep it open for a minute or two here.
I
Thanks
hope I
again.
haven't, I hope I didn't, I know I see I did about an hour and a half. I'm sorry. I hope that wasn't too long.
That's
It was
fine.
fine, and many people said they enjoyed it in the chat room. So how often do you make these trips?
Go ahead, Kathy.
Well, every year we've been going somewhere. Once we retired about 5 or 6 years ago, we started doubling up on them. So we might go for two-week trips in a row. But, you know, that's, well, and then we had the years where we were helping the touring company in Europe where we stayed about 9 or 10 weeks, but that was unusual.
Mhm.
But every year for the past 20 plus years, we've been going away.
Yeah, my late wife and I started taking the trips. She was a physician in the area and she was geriatric physician. And she's like, you know, we've got to start doing some of these things because we never know when we're not going to be able to. Karma. But so Kathy and I certainly continued that. And it is very relaxing to, in my late wife's case, being a busy doctor, it was crucial to have those few weeks off and to unwind. So yeah, if you're even thinking about it, do it. It's kind of the way to go.
Great recommendation.
Yeah.
And do you guys have a trip planned during this next year?
Well, 2020, we were actually scheduled for Pakistan with Red Spokes again. But of course that didn't happen. And they happily refunded the money. They said, you know, we don't know what 2021 is going to be like. My guess is they actually will run the 2021. That'll be September, October. I don't think Kathy's ready to jump on that yet, but we never know. You know, if things look like they're opening up faster, maybe we will.
Don Burns asked, are hills? Is it like the Adirondacks? What's the Southeast Asia topography that you've been biking?
Well, it certainly depends on which country you're in. Laos had a lot of steep hills. Vietnam had a fair number of steep hills. The particular tours we took, most people take, in Vietnam, they typically go from Hanoi down to Saigon, which is relatively flat. But we had gone up towards China, which was much more mountainous. This Burma, I don't recall, Kathy, that we had anything that was super sharp and steep. Did we?
No, there were some long climbs, but nothing real steep.
Yeah, a lot of their agriculture, a lot of their towns, they're all built on lower, gentle, undulating country. They weren't pressed for space, so they didn't build up through the sides of the hillsides. So you don't have any really, it wasn't anything steep there.
Okay, thanks. Well, we won't hold on to you any longer, but I do
I can
appreciate
stay.
both of you taking the time to make this wonderful presentation. We will, as I said in the middle of your presentation, we are recording it and we'll put it on the ADK GVC website. And if you want to copy it from there, you're welcome to. So thanks again. Appreciate
Thanks,
it very
Steve and
much.
Kathy.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'll say good night to everybody.
Yeah,
All
good
right.
night, folks.
Say goodnight, Dick.
Good night, Dick.